All right. So this fanfiction idea was basically one I've done before, and one I like to come back to even every so often. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of this genre, I do have enough knowledge to like at least the bare minimum of certain wrestlers and whatnot, and certain terms to at least say I could make this somewhat work. And that is a good old fashioned wrestling AU, basically taking a lot of characters and making them into wrestlers. And what kind of wrestlers would they be like in this universe? So yeah, there's a bunch of different stories and things like that that all kind of have a lot of continuity with each other. There's a lot of connections between characters and things like that. So without further ado, let's talk about the stories of each character. So in this, one of the main stories is about Anne and Sasha, who for the longest time have wanted to be like pro wrestlers. They've always wanted to be professional wrestlers. They've done the amateur rings and things like that as a tag team, kind of like the Iconics. In a way, like they've been a pair of amateur divas who have done a lot of like tag team and amateur rings. However, one of Marcy is part of the big pro league. She's a writer on the staff, and she's managed to finagle away because they were looking for new tryouts, new contracts, and Marcy basically put in a good word for Sasha and Anne, and they are immediately like, holy crap, we're going to be, wrestlers together. And Marcy's immediately like, actually, there's a caveat. And they're like, what? What's the caveat? What do we need to do? And Marcy's like, well, the good news is I got you in. The bad news is you can't be a tag team. You guys, we are due to scheduling and a kind of imbalance of heel to babyface. Kind of need one of you to be the heel, one of you to be the babyface diva. So they basically Marcy that's the ultimatum, is that the only way they get to be wrestlers is not as a tag team anymore. And Marcy herself has aspirations of leaving the writing room and being a wrestler herself, but she's kind of not there yet because she's still Marcy and she's clumsy. So Sasha becomes the heel. She becomes like a very Rhea Ripley type wrestler, kind of like using scare tactics and things like that. And Anne is the baby face. That's what they call the good wrestlers. And she's more like, I can't really think of a comparison directly for her, but that's kind of the thing, is that they're now from tag team to rivals. And that's kind of that's kind of their storyline. Meanwhile, you've got others, and I talked about this one before. You've got Dipper and Mabel, who were a tag team, but they weren't really working out. It also doesn't help that there's kind of some resentment among the other wrestlers because their great uncle Stan, he's the Vince McMahon of this operation, and they don't want to be seen as just the kind of through nepotism. They want to have their own identity. So what they did was basically make completely new identities. Dipper took on a new name, Bill Cipher, as his wrestling name, and he created Decipher, which is they're basically the Wyatt Six. Like Mabel's in there. Seuss is part of it. He was also he was kind of a jobber wrestler at this point, and didn't really have much to go on. Like he was kind of like he was almost like borderline on the way out, because all he was just a punching bag for a lot of the bigger names. But Dipper's like, hey, you want to come join our group? We're making a new wrestling team. And he's like, oh, dude, that's awesome. And finally, Wendy joins the group, and Wendy herself does have her own little solo storyline. She's basically she's like Becky Lynch. She's very much like the Becky Lynch of this whole operation. But she's not like, in their storyline, she's basically like lost her world title series to Sashi, who in here is kind of like Aksha, or a lot of like classic Japanese wrestlers. She's wearing like face paint, and she takes this shit seriously. So in the storyline, she basically lost her world championship belt to Sashi, and in the storyline, Dipper basically is like, oh, I can, join us, and you will have, you'll be granted, your revenge and whatnot. So now she's part of Decipher, who again, They're very much like a Wyatt Six kind of group. They're all kind of like dressed as backwoods hillbillies and kind of like invoke dark powers and serve the beast with one eye. That's the idea. You've got other wrestlers like Pen Zero, who's very much like the Joe Hendry, which if you know the meme, then you know that's perfect for Penn. Say his name and he appears. I believe in Pen Zero. He just turns around with this dumbass smile. Yeah, he's just Joe Hendry, and he is with Sashi, and they have this great golden retriever black cat energy, and sometimes do tag teams. You have Toffee in here. He is basically he's like Undertaker. He has been around incredibly long. He's been here for the longest time. And he's kind of he's like the old man. He's got a lot of backroom locker room leadership behind him. Like he's usually the go-between between a lot of the new wrestlers and a lot of the performers in general, and Stan whenever he comes up with a really dumb shit idea. So he's usually like the first line of defense. And there are some other wrestlers from Stan's era because Stan himself was a wrestler. Ford is a major producer who has had Stan's back, but also like kind of in his ear, like, hey, we have some, we have some cost value and stuff like that. But among other like of the classic wrestlers who have stayed on and not retired like Toffee yet, you have Ida. Ida in here is kind of like a female version of oh God, why am I forgetting? Mick Foley. She's very much like a female Mick Foley. She did a lot of like dumb stuff and has wrecked her body through all the dumb shit sometimes that Stan made her do. So she's now like a veteran wrestler and has taken Luz under her wing. And Luz herself is very much like a she has a lot of flair to her. Not saying she's like the Ric Flair, but more like she has a lot of flair and wears she's very like she's flashy. She's very much like all eyes on me kind of wrestling, and Ida's kind of her mentor. Speaking of mentors, you also have Grimes, another elderly wrestler who has taken Sasha under his wing and been training her. He also is like, he's more or less on the way out. His body's wrecked too, and even Toffee and Ida have been like, dude, you should just stop, man. You can't keep going to the hospital over and over again. But he's like, I can't live without this. Like this is my life. Like he always like stays with Sasha as like a tag team partner and doesn't want to let go of the glory days. He's your Ric Flair. Then you have like you've got like who else? You have like trying to think of you have Star, who's very much like a she's kind of like the pretty princess kind of wrestler, and you've got Marco, who's like Rey Mysterio with a little bit of Seth Rollins to him. You've got the Blight family, who Odalia is also on the higher up managerial staff and is kind of a workhorse and trying to get Stan's job. No one really likes Stan. Like everyone has a problem with Stan in one way or another, but at least he can be reasoned with. The underlying thing is like if Odalia ever took over as CEO of the company, it'd be so much worse. Like everyone agrees that like she would just implement all these other changes that would not work well. And speaking of nepotism, she has her family, her kids as wrestlers. You've got Amity, Emra, and Edric as all part of a single wrestling group, and Amity's trying to break away from it because she really has got a major crush on Luz, but Odalia just doesn't see it. Like, yeah, Luz basically came from nothing. It's very much like with Anne, where she was kind of this amateur wrestler who wanted to be like a major wrestler in her own right and worshipped Ida in her younger years, and is like, it's very much like almost like Midoriya and All Might with those two. But Odalia really has a problem with like giving contracts to off the street amateurs, and Stan's like, we don't have to sell big names all the time. We can get new talent, and people will get bored. Like if we just recycle old stuff. Very un-Vince McMahon, I know, but If you know wrestling, then it's like, that doesn't sound like Vince McMahon at all. But yeah, Stan can be reasoned with. He also does a lot of like dumbass plot, like storylines. But Stan can be reasoned with if you rail against him hard enough. Odalia, her taking over would be a bad thing. So yeah, that's kind of the AU in general. Like, I just wanted to. It's just a fun thing I come back to every so often. Yeah. So you guys tell me in the comments below, what did you guys think of this AU? I know I've done it before, but it's always fun to come back to every so often. So yeah, just comment below, let me know. Other than that, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time, Multiverse.